Hi there, everyone. This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth on this Friday, April 10th, 2015. And today we're going to be talking about the Bilderberg Group because their annual summit is coming up right around the corner. It's going to be held in June this year. And joining us on the line to talk about this today is Paul Joseph Watson of Infowars.com and YouTube.com/PrisonPlanet Paul, thanks so much, man, for taking some time to speak with us today.
Good to be here, Dan.
So I want to get into what you think might be on the agenda for this year, who some of the major players might be. But for people who may not be familiar with this, and I'll apologize to our audience who have heard this too many times, but there's new people watching all the time. Can you just lay it out for us a little bit? Just who exactly is the Bilderberg Group, and why should people be concerned about them?
Bilderberg Group is basically a gaggle of 120 members of the elite. Bankers, industrialists, members of the media, academia, members of the arts, the financial world. And they gather once a year annually. Behind closed doors, there's very little mainstream media coverage. And basically the cover story every single year from the media is these people have no influence, despite the fact that they all take 3 or 4 days out of their schedule to meet in one place, which is unheard of anywhere else. And that they make no policy, they set no treaties. But if you actually look at what Bilderberg members have said in the aftermath and the decisions that have been implemented, it's clear that the consensus for the policy decisions that follow Bilderberg meetings are decided upon at Bilderberg conferences. You can look at Will Hutton, for example, a Bilderberg member who said in 1998, Bilderberg is one of the key meetings of the year. The consensus established is the backdrop against which policy is made worldwide. And former NATO Secretary General Willy Klaas said the same thing in 2010 during a radio interview, that basically Bilderberg members are mandated to implement policy decisions which are formulated during these meetings. So they don't actually sign treaties or documents, but they do set the consensus for those treaties and agreements which are later implemented, but the mainstream never reports on that.
Well, we've actually seen just proof of exactly that with the fact that just last year Bilderberg announced on their own website that one of the key talking points was going to be Ukraine, and then obviously this is a big part of the news going on this year. What's going on with Ukraine and Russia seems like it's going to be a big topic this year, possibly what to do with Iran or the internet. What other sorts of things do you think they're going to have on the agenda for this year?
Well, obviously Ukraine's going to be a big one. We had the vote last month in Congress. So they passed a resolution urging Obama to send more lethal weaponry to the Ukrainian military. So even though there's a kind of fragile ceasefire in place at the moment, it looks like they want to reignite tensions there. Russia has warned that arming the Ukrainian military with more lethal weapons could, quote, explode the whole situation. So that's definitely going to be on the agenda. But there's kind of a continuation from G7 to Bilderberg. It's a lot of the same people attend. They've got the same security procedure in place for both events. So G7 is taking place just a week before in Bavaria, Germany. So they're going to be talking about some of the same issues. And what's coming out of the G7 is they're going to be talking about this concern amongst top scientists in the World Health Organization that people are dying from basic infections that were previously treatable because of the problem with antibiotics. The two key antibiotics that a lot of people use now, in more than half of people being treated in some countries, have stopped working because they've developed immunity to these bacterial infections. So that seems like it's going to be a big talking point. Communicable diseases, Ebola, issues like that are going to be covered by G7, so they're likely to be covered by Bilderberg. And then, Agenda 21, they're going to try and reignite this dead zombie of the global warming tax paid directly to the UN. So they're probably going to be talking about, this whole Plandopolis idea, this post-industrial revolution about trying to squeeze everybody into compact cities and having this elite technocracy rule over their lives in the name of stopping man-made climate change and global warming, which of course has come under increased scrutiny and skepticism in recent years. So I think those are the main issues. Obviously it's early days. we get leaks beforehand occasionally, or most years we get leaks beforehand on the kind of topics we expect them to discuss. They do now publish an agenda, a list of topics on the official Bilderberg website, but it's often quite vague. And in fact, last year when we had Samson, I think it was the Dutch politician who came out and spoke to the protesters, he said that he presented a talk on renewable energy, which wasn't listed on the official agenda, the official talking points of Bilderberg. So we know they discuss things which they don't disclose. So whatever's on the agenda, they will be discussing other issues aside from that, which will be kept secret.
Well, some people may wonder why the secrecy. You know, if they're just meeting and discussing foreign policy, why do things have to be so secret for them?
Well, I mean, a lot of the secrecy is, I mean, just look at the security, for example. That's why it's going to be different from last year, I think, because we got too close last year in Copenhagen. We basically got right up to them when they were out on the patio.
We did.
So, you know, a lot of it is security related, but the secrecy is because these people who talk with Bilderberg are actually violating the Logan Act and other treaties and laws that are in place in certain countries. So they're actually breaking the law by conversing with and setting the consensus of policy with foreign dignitaries. So they're very aware of that, and that's why they want to keep more of these issues secret and out of the public eye. And obviously because they talk about a lot of stuff which, if it was released and it became public, would be, you know, debated amongst the, quote, conspiracy theorists, and they're afraid of that getting out of hand and being mischaracterized. So there are a number of reasons for why they prefer secrecy, but it always seems to be the case.
Well, I would have to agree that they ought to be worried about us. I mean, last year, you're right, we got right up into their faces and managed to confront some of the people on the organizing committee, the steering committee. We also, you know, confronted Peter Sutherland of Goldman Sachs. Sometimes when you just go to these things, you end up running into some of these guys, and you can ask them these questions that the mainstream media isn't. So, you know, you've covered a few of these. Do you have plans to go this year?
Yeah, well, I've been to all of them since 2011, apart from the one in Chantilly. So I'll probably be there. We haven't finalized anything yet. Joe Biggs is probably, you know, going to be there as well. So that's always fun hanging out with him. But what's going to be interesting about it is they've decided to welcome us with the Cobra anti-terror squad. And it sounds very friendly, doesn't it, Cobra? This is Austria's primary counter-terrorism unit. They're mainly used to deal with situations such as hijacked planes and hostage rescue. And in fact, they were formed as a response to the attack on Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympics. So this is a highly trained, elite anti-terror squad. And they're going to be covering the security for G7 as well, which, you know, they could kind of justify that. There's going to be thousands of people protesting.
Right.
But to then use the same anti-terror squad for what will be probably a couple of hundred at most peaceful demonstrators in a remote location really sounds like overkill.
Yeah.
And then you actually look at how they're armed, and they basically carry around assault rifles, pistols, and even grenade launchers. They're basically armed riot cops. So it seems like it's going to be a lot more intense in terms of security than it was compared to the last couple of years. Well,
you know, Paul, perhaps they want the clash. I mean, I used to wonder about G8 meetings, G20 meetings, and, you know, they sometimes want this clash to happen and to have the people fight back that much so they can clamp down on their rights. And do you think Bilderberg is becoming so public now that they're going to take the route of what they're doing with G20 type protests by discrediting the protesters, by bringing in agent provocateurs and going that whole route with Bilderberg? Are they being forced to take that route now?
Well, we've seen elements of that. I mean, in Watford in 2013, they erected a whole anti-terror zone around the whole area, so you couldn't get near to it. And in 2011 in Switzerland, they had a fake bomb threat, which was very suspicious at the time. So they could go down that route. But, you know, this is in a very remote location. It's up in the mountains. I think it's like 1,300 meters altitude. It's surrounded by forests and wilderness. So it's not going to be a massive police operation. It has no need to be. So whether they need to resort to that based on the amount of people that turn up, I don't know. I mean, in Copenhagen, it was right next to the city centre, but only about 100 people turned up. So it depends how active and energized the Austrian people are about Bilderberg, and we don't really know that until we get there and see what's what.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see. So I certainly hope to see you there. I'm going to try my best to get there as well, especially with this joint security task force team sitting there patrolling this thing directly after G7. That sounds like this is going to be very different from previous years. Any final thoughts on what you think people might be able to expect either on the agenda or what this protest scene might be like this year?
Normally there's a huge activist community organizing around it. I guess we're early April now, so it's still a couple of months out. But I haven't really seen a massive activist presence. There was quite a presence before Copenhagen, but not that many people showed up. But it is in a remote location. People are going to find it difficult to get there, which is in fact what Bilderberg celebrated a few years ago in Spain, where they said that people are they're having less disposable income. We've got this wealth gap being created, so less people can actually travel to Bilderberg to protest their meetings. So I'm guessing it'll be similar to Switzerland in 2011, because that's a similar area, very remote mountainous area. So, but we had 300 people turn out for that. So hopefully people will get on board with it and come out in force. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll just have to see. I think the last time they met in Austria was in 1979, the year I was born, and now they happen to be coming back in June around the time of my birthday, just so happens to be, so I'm going to be there as well. That should be interesting. Paul, thank you once again. I hope to see you there. Tell people where they can go to learn more from you about Bilderberg.
Obviously Infowars.com, and closer to the time I'll be posting about it on my YouTube channel, Prison Planet Live, and my Twitter, which is @PrisonPlanet.
Fantastic. Paul Joseph Watson, Infowars.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.